We are back, and you're listening to the Critical Hour on Radio Sputnik. I'm Wilmer Leon, joined here by my co-host, Garland Nixon.
Thank you, Wilmer.
It's now reported Ethiopia on the brink of collapse as the Tigray conflict reaches a boiling point. The country's erratic prime minister continues to fan the flames. What do we make of this developing problem? For insight, we turn to our next guest. He's a journalist and founder of GhionJournal.com, Tedros Fikre. Welcome back.
Thank you so much, Dr. Leon and Garland. I always enjoy the conversation here.
Thank you. So the report is, after 8 months of failing to treat the war, atrocities, and famine in the Tigray region of Ethiopia with a seriousness that they deserve, the UN Security Council is finally meeting on the crisis as early as this week. What has occasioned this is the military triumph of the Tigray Defense Force over the Ethiopian army. Tedros, what's going on now?
Sure. So the recent developments, which were kind of shocking, to be honest with you, is that the TPLF, or the TDF, basically drove into Mekelle. And what Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said is that it's gone to the point where they can't differentiate between the combatants and the civilians. So in the interest, according to what he said, in the interest of humanitarianism, they're going to just withdraw. When I was on here a while ago, I noted that insurgencies are never quick and easy. They protracted. They could take years and sometimes even decades, as evidenced by what's taking place in Afghanistan, when in Iraq, where the U.S. has been involved in that as occupiers for more than a decade. This is not the ending. This is not even the beginning of the end. This is probably the beginning of the beginning, because it's going to get uglier, I believe. I believe what Abiy Ahmed is doing is pulling back to kind of reconsolidate, and I think the TPLF or the TDF, they're kind of filling their oats right now, and they might decide to cross over into other regions. So this has the potential of really, really getting out of hand and becoming even a wider conflict. There's also news that there's some agitation taking place between Sudan and Ethiopia, and that could be part of the reason that the Ethiopian Defense Forces kind of withdrew, because there might be other threats at play. So it's a fluid situation, and it's not looking like it's going to get better anytime soon.
Teddy, I did have a question about the TPLF. We had an excellent guest on the other day that talked. She was from the Tigray region and talked about this conflict very ably. But one of the things that I asked her, being a layman on this particular issue, I said, "What do you think of the TPLF? Are they the good guys? Are they the bad guys? Have they done something wrong?" And her position was, "No, I don't think they're the bad guys here. I don't think they're in the wrong." I wanted to get your perspective on it, because, as I said, we're getting lots of different perspectives, and it may be the same or different. Your thoughts on the TPLF and overall. Can you look at this and say this group or these people are the good guys and this group or these people are the bad guys, or is it more complicated than that?
And before you do that, let me just quickly say that the TDF is the armed wing of the TPLF. Okay. The Tigray People's Liberation Front is the party, and the TDF is their army. Okay, is that right?
Correct. That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
All right. So, because we've been throwing those two acronyms around, or those two abbreviations around, and I wanted to be sure folks understood. Go ahead.
So, these things, there's never, when it comes to politics and war, nothing is easy. In fact, I was having a pretty drawn-out conversation with some very hardcore TPLF proponents this morning. And even for me, I had to kind of revise, not the fact that, what I've said in the past, which I kind of hold on to this day, which is that the TPLF as an organization, for the past, 27 years, since 1991 up until 2018, they were the driving force behind the government of Ethiopia, which was, they rebranded themselves as EPRDF. And they've committed countless atrocities. a genocide against the people of Anwar, for example, sterilization of ethnic Amaras, persecution and of all of those. I mean, they've been equal opportunity oppressors, and also they've also oppressed their own people. Tigray people have also felt the weight of TPLF, EPRDF. All these acronyms, useless acronyms, have also been victims of the TPLF as an organization. But one of the things that they said to me is that, in the articles that I write, I always say, Abiy Ahmed, I blame Abiy Ahmed for this. I blame Isaias Afwerki, who's the Eritrean prime minister or president. And then I go and say TPLF. And how come I don't do the same thing? Why do I collectively judge? And I'm not doing the same thing when it comes to Abiy Ahmed and Isaias Afwerki. And that really did, put a pause or a question mark in my mind. Because the problem when you say TPLF as a whole, and I've always said for a long time, when I criticize TPLF, I'm not criticizing or condemning Tigray people as a whole, right? But it's very problematic. It's like when I also talk about, write about American politics. When I criticize Republicans, I'm not criticizing Republican voters. I'm criticizing the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. When I criticize Democrats, I'm not blaming Democratic voters. But people latch on to these identities, and the minute that I criticize or condemn TPLF, then what happens is you have a lot of people that affiliate with the TPLF. And I can't necessarily in good conscience say, collectively judge everyone that happens to embrace the TPLF. Especially like since the conflict broke out, a lot of people in Tigray felt like they had no other choice but to embrace TPLF. If TPLF existed in a vacuum, a lot of Tigray people would actually be against them. They're not these nice actors. They're a lot of them have been basically feasting off of Ethiopia and living like royals, siphoning off millions, tens of millions, and in the case of Meles Nawi, potentially billions of dollars. And while the rest of Ethiopians have been struggling and suffering for a very long time. So I'm trying to figure out how to address these things to lay blame where it belongs without necessarily collectively judging. But as an organization, as a governing body, as a regime, TPLF are very responsible for what took place. It was because of 27 years of committing atrocities, reviving what I call neo-apartheid in Ethiopia, where they carved out homelands. In South Africa, they call them Bantustans, and these homelands were created based on ethnicity. And so imagine in America, if you had New York for white people, Georgia for black folks, New Mexico for Mexican, for Latino, mm-hmm. California for gays, right? Or, can you imagine then that level of separatism would ultimately create a level of friction or strife between society. You can't, when people look at ethnicity first, then they forget about the common humanity. And that's exactly what Meles Nawi and his clan and his cabal did. They were chosen at the London Conference in 1991, specifically, I believe, to voice this level of atrocity and atrocious policy on Ethiopia. And so, no, they're not the good guys. But again, it goes back to, when I criticize Trump, I don't conflate that with all people that support Trump. And so for me, that's the fine line we're trying to walk.
So right now you have the Ethiopian National Defense Force, which is the army, the national army of Ethiopia, and they're fighting the TDF, which is the armed wing of the TPLF. And the Ethiopian National Defense Force is allied with the Eritrean army.
Correct.
So as this dust settles, does the Eritrean army go back to Eritrea and the Ethiopian National Defense Force stay south of Tigray, and the Tigray people are able to peacefully coexist? How do you see this dust settling? And also, you mentioned the Sudan. Is the Sudan looking at what's happening in Ethiopia, seeing a weakness and taking advantage of a weakness, or is Sudan operating with another interest, if that question makes sense?
Yeah, I think it's both. Up until recently, up until our studies broke out, there was never any explicit clash between Ethiopia and South Sudan. I know that there's been simmering conflicts on the border, but they never took it to the next level. And it's all when you see your enemy that's kind of going through a level of strife. Sometimes they're motivated to act on accordingly, and so that's what they're doing. And there's also other actors at play. There's a lot of things at play within Ethiopia because it's not just the Ethiopian National Defense Force, TDF, and the Eritrean military. You also have ethnic-based, going back to thank you to Meles Nawi, you have every ethnicity have their own homelands, and then they were incentivized to have their own militia. So you have the Oromo militia, OLF, Oromo Liberation Front. You have the Amara militia. You have the Tigray militia. This is it's a hornet's nest. And then you have outside interests that are funding and arming them, right? And so if they're going to take this up in the Security Council, I wish they would tell countries that are funding and arming these factions to stop doing that. They've been. This is why the liberation fronts have been the bane of Africa's existence for over a century. You have these imperial forces that train militias, that fund them, that arm them, and then they play both sides of the equation, and they do the same thing to with the government, and then that creates perpetual strife. This is the classical playbook of colonizers, and as long as you have the group on the out that's being funded and armed almost to parity with the government, and then you convince them to fight each other. What happens is you have all the natural resources and wealth of all these countries being siphoned off overseas. So the ultimately, if you look at the source of it, a lot of that can also be traced back to a lot of outside interests that have a vested interest in keeping Ethiopia and really Africa writ large in a perpetual state of conflict and strife.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Wilmer Leon here and Garland Nixon. We want to, Tedros Fikre, we want to thank you so much for your time. We greatly, greatly appreciate it. We look forward to having you back because unfortunately we know that this is not going to end quietly and it is not going to end soon.
Definitely, it's not. It has a long ways to go. I'm actually writing a feature article about this that I'm going to publish most likely tomorrow. Okay. And it's kind of a it's an attention grabber. It's titled from Peace Prize to Irrelevance: How Abiy Ahmed Failed Ethiopia. So I'm going to most likely publish that tomorrow at the Ghion Journal.
Well, please send it to us and we'll get you back to discuss it. Thank you.
I definitely will. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.